friend Spencer Crumb, yeah, he explained it well when he described it as fiddleware.
Yes.
Because yeah, it's maddening, just like how very particular you have to be with it, and you're definitely much braver for using OBS for running live streams than I am, because I tried to do that a few times with I help run the Kansas City Java users group,
Mm.
and um, tried using OBS for running our live streams a couple of times, 2 or 3 times, and like it actually went in reverse where like each stream just got worse and worse and worse. And eventually I completely gave up and went with StreamYard, and it's been fine since then. And OBS is great because it gives you incredible flexibility, like we're doing like a
Mhm.
soundboard and that, but I just didn't have the time to devote
Mhm.
to figuring it out, or I just don't have the intelligence to figure it out. One of those two. Um,
No,
so
no, I totally get it. And also, I have a dedicated laptop to stream from, right?
mhm.
And it's not my main work laptop. Like, it's not the
Oh,
one I
that
do all my
helps.
actual stuff on. Well, it helps, but the problem is it's also Windows, and none. It's also like over here, and my
hmm
keyboard and all my normal stuff that I do is in front of me. So anytime I need to like play with it, I have to use the laptop keyboard, and it's very frustrating. But anyway, okay. So sorry, I'll stop bitching
Oh,
about
that's all right.
OBS. But yes, hi, I'm JJ. As Billy said, I'm also a developer advocate for IBM Cloud. Thank you for joining us. And Billy, you have some really cool stuff to show us after the stream we did a couple weeks ago. How about
Yes,
before you start sharing your screen and talking about it, kind of give us a background of what you're working on and what you've put together, and then we can kind of just start hacking on some code.
absolutely. So, yeah, what I'm working on, we're going to be talking, I think maybe mentioned before, just briefly, is we're going to be talking Tekton. If you're not familiar with Tekton, it is a framework for building CI/CD pipelines that's built using the Kubernetes API that can also run on Kubernetes as well. Of course, every Kubernetes is taking
Mhm.
over the cloud world, so kind of works together well enough. Sometimes I do at times feel like I have a bit of a love hate relationship when it comes to Kubernetes, which I'm sure everyone is pretty familiar with who's kind of worked
Mhm.
with Kubernetes to any meaningful extent. Uh, but oh, here, sorry, I was just doing a little prep work before this. Um, but my background before developer advocate, I was a developer, and so I was somewhat familiar with like Jenkins and stuff. But I very much come from DevOps, very much from the dev side, and I've been putting together this material on what I call living in the cloud, on just kind of like if you have just done nothing with cloud before, which is kind of what I was like before coming to IBM, just kind of like a soup to nuts, like just no prior expectation of how do you actually start building and deploying applications out on Kubernetes. Now I'm also coming at it particularly from a Java Spring perspective. Not that that always matters too much, but it's kind of always good to have an example that you're familiar with within the code itself, as opposed to if if I saw something in Node, like I would have no idea how like that Node application was working. I was going to deploy it out there, but I couldn't really make any changes to it. So at least I know for me that can be kind of helpful to kind of be like, oh, I can actually make changes to this application, and then experiment with it once it's actually out there, not it just being a black box.
Mhm.
Um, so with that, like I spent about the last felt like month and a half learning Tekton, and so we're gonna kind of maybe in this live stream kind of share what I learned, and hopefully it'll actually go a little bit better than last time when I ran into a few issues. I think kind of what happened was is I kind of initially got it working, and I was working in like a different Git repository, and I did a bunch of refactoring, didn't get that properly all transferred over to my GitHub, which is where I kind of store everything, and too many Git repositories, too many tab windows open. Um, and so we ran into a few issues, but hopefully it'll run a little bit smoother this time. So
Nice.
I guess with that said, I guess maybe we can just go ahead and actually do some code. Do you sound good to you?
Yeah, man. No, it's and that's the beauty of streaming, right?
Yeah.
Is that we get to see how the sausage is made, and I'm here to ask the questions because I know very little about Java.
Yeah.
I actually, no joke, I failed out of all my Java classes in computer science. I
Oh
actually
wow.
did. Yeah, and
Wow.
um, I for whatever reason, Java and I never saw eye to eye. I couldn't get it. Um, I just couldn't do it.
You know.
I granted, I eventually realized I couldn't do real computer science, so I went into management information systems and became a sysadmin because that's what I'm good at doing.
Well, a dozen years in the field now, and there's times I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing.
Nice.
So let's see. Wait, is it showing the which one? Okay, I think that's not the window I want to show here. Let me try that again. Desktop 2. There we go. Is it showing your Kubernetes cluster on the live
Yes.
stream and our stuff
Yes, it
now?
is.
Okay.
And
All
yep,
right. That's weird.
we
Yeah, it's
see.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, the way Zoom was presenting it, it looked like it was showing my
Mhm.
laptop screen instead of the main screen I wanted to show. Yeah, no, actually, yesterday I was working on a whole separate issue. And, anyways, about 2 hours of the time I lost just because I was trying to pass in a command to change my local Maven repo. And pretty much I did like Maven local.repo, but I needed to actually put the command as Maven repo.local.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like, so I don't know. I still don't know what I'm doing. It's kind of what I've learned. All
Well,
right.
what do you tell engineers straight out of college? You just fake it till you make it. Trust me, that's
Yeah.
what you do. You fake it
Yeah.
until you make it, and before you know it, you're doing what you said you could do.
Hmm. Absolutely. Oh man, yeah. I'm still faking it though. So, with all that said, a bit with how I'm approaching this Tekton look, we're going to so IBM Cloud has a good Tekton integration. And generally, the way I kind of view it as well is that if you're going to be using a cloud platform, you're going to be using it. You're not going to spend a bunch of time configuring and setting up like your own custom dashboard for using Tekton and stuff like that. It might as well, if you're paying for whether it's IBM Cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, whatever it might be, it makes sense to actually take advantage of the integrations that your cloud provider provides, whether it's a Tekton or logging or monitoring. Might as well take advantage of that, so you're not spending so much time on this configuration stuff because, well, I can tell you it takes a long time. So with that, IBM Cloud's DevOps offering is done through tool chains. And so we're going to set up a tool chain, which then will be used to run our Tekton pipeline. And so we go in here and we're just creating an empty tool chain. Actually, if you see back here real quick, there are a bunch of different pre-configured options as well, which generally, maybe would recommend. I think you can even create your own pre-configured options within your organization. But we're going to just look at just a very basic, or there's no templating really, just to see that all that there is to offer. So we're going to just do this called our Tekton test pipeline. And so then to this, we're going to add in some Git repositories. And yes, we'll clone it. And also one of the things I found is generally within an organization, unless you're doing open source work, you're going to be doing a private repository. If you're working for whatever health insurance, financial regulation, general companies, you're generally going to be working from a private repository. And at least when I was kind of working and learning about Tekton, like I couldn't find any examples of like a commit was pushed to a repository, build off of it and stuff like that. So that's also one thing I really wanted to show. It's like a kind of a more real world use case instead of like a very simple hello world building from like your local to deploy it out, because that's generally not what's going to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that doesn't affect us, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's because we had to turn on the service again. Click on
Oh,
the
okay.
remember the no. Or the add service button. Add this
Okay.
service. Yeah. Remember, I because I went and cleaned everything up, but
Yeah,
that
that's
was
right.
on. Yep.
Yes, I think this should work. All right. Hopefully that does the thing that it needs to get this to work. While that's working, we'll continue. So we're adding a few different Git repositories here. It's all actually to run just to build a single application. But we'll kind of cover in a moment here what these additional Git repositories are doing.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual project that we're going to be building from is this one, the Living on the Cloud. That's going to be the actual application we're building and deploying. And then these two additional repositories. These two last repositories are tekton catalogs. So one of the benefits, but also the frustrations of tekton in my experience is there's a very, very, very strong focus on reusability. So we'll look at what some of these definition files are for what's actually constructing a pipeline, but it's across many different kind of concepts within tekton, and they're all separated out so they could be potentially reusable. This is nice because what we can have here is like we have this tekton catalog, which is maintained. So we have contributors to tekton ourselves at IBM, and they have this thing called the open tool chain, and they provided a bunch of tasks. And actually going to be using one of the tasks here, this task to clone a Git repository. It's already predefined, so I didn't have to spend a bunch of time figuring out how to clone a repository within tekton. It's already predefined for me. So you can have this stuff completely like open source that's available to the world, but also within your organization, you can define some of these tasks as well that you might be sharing within your organization to accomplish common goals. That's nice, but some of the offset of that is with usability comes additional abstraction layers. So sometimes, at least initially, it was kind of difficult for me to kind of follow that through line where you have to define a parameter in like many different locations in order for it to actually maybe eventually get to your task that you're actually running. So like the URL that I'm passing to, or like this get access token, the token I'm passing in so I can connect to my private repository, like it's defined in like 4 different areas throughout my tekton pipeline before it eventually gets there. And so like sometimes that can be a bit confusing to work with. So I guess on the balance, it maybe is kind of worth it. Maybe once you also kind of fully understand it, but it does really ramp up that initial learning curve. I don't know, because you've done a lot with tekton yourself. I don't know what's been your experience in that regard. Was it also kind of difficult, that initial learning phase, or did you just pick it up like right away?
No. That's a great question. And Billy and I have come from it from two very different angles. You came in from the IBM kind of, we're pulling all the IBM things to get tekton to work, and tekton's a driver underneath a bunch of IBM facade, if you will. The way I learned it was I actually jumped directly to the tekton API and played around with the core tekton.dev/try world. I do want to say that there is a lot of repeated code in it, and it is really odd that you will find those times that, to your point about the API key or whatever, that for whatever reason, the initial times people made these things, they repeat it and they don't just use variables, right? Like just be like, write this once and then it'll call it back. I will say the Tekton catalog now has a lot of has matured significantly, and I'm not that is a very strong significant, but I'm dancing around the question to basically say that yes, I was very frustrated with it too. Though I am actually looking forward to. I'm gonna just go ahead and plug another stream while I'm talking here as you're doing this. I'm going to be playing around with Jenkins X from the ground up soon on the actual CD Foundation Twitch stream soon. I think we're actually going to do it the same time next week. Is I'll be on the CD Foundation learning about Jenkins X. And I was told by the people who were putting it together, it's like, JJ, you know of Jenkins X, but we want you to know nothing else. We need you to come in and ask the questions, because honestly, that's how I learn, is I ask questions, and I try not to do anything, because first time experiences are so valuable for software projects, because if you can't say the story, like why this is good, and or I don't know. I'm rambling. Sorry. Keep
it's
going.
Fine. Yeah, Jenkins X is kind of one of the things. So kind of how I came to this as well. It wasn't like I really set out to learn Tekton. It was a bit of like I came to it to provide a solution to like an issue. So I kind of mentioned how I'm putting together like a series of articles of kind of like moving on to like migrating to the cloud. And so one of the things is like, so we have a couple of solutions for providing pipelines on IBM that has like a close integration. Because when I wanted to show this, kind of I mentioned earlier that if you're on a cloud platform, you're going to want to use that cloud platform, and also just show it as well, because if you have like 1,000 configuration steps and it's really complex and you have to spin a bunch of stuff up, like I don't know if like a person would be able to always do that on a free account. So pretty much what it is that kind of like the other choice we had was we're using like our classic pipeline choice, but it was very limited. It's actually built on Tekton itself, but like it didn't quite give you all the options Tekton has, or at least when I experienced with it, it didn't give you all the options Tekton has. Things like conditional task running and stuff like that. So I learned about Tekton because when I was wanting to demonstrate like how to build a CI/CD pipeline, I wanted to be able to show something that actually like a person could read the article, apply it to organization, and then it would actually scale to meet the needs of their organization. It's not like, oh, okay, I know how to do this, but then it's not going to actually work in like a real world setting. So that's kind of how I came to it. Okay. So while you were talking, one of the things I was kind of doing here in the background was I was adding this key protect service. And I think I may have covered it in the previous live stream. But of course, when you're pushing stuff out, like every organization, like connecting to databases, connecting to other services, you're going to have API keys, passwords, certificates, stuff like that you need to protect and store in a location. But you also may need them during like your pipeline builds and stuff like that. So this is what this key protect is doing here. It can be a location to store sensitive key information, and you can actually then pull it into your pipeline. So that's what I'm going to do here. We're going to need it here in a few moments as well.
Okay.
Just to explain all that's actually happening. And actually then finally, and then Tekton live stream pipeline. Very descriptive. These are like the best naming.
The best naming.
Yes. All right. And then so also,
Mm-hmm.
And we can, so then like, for example, I'm creating this Surface API key for performing different actions on, that can connect to our service and just do different things on the IBM Cloud. And we're also then creating it, tekton, for a worker that we're going to be installing on our Kubernetes cluster. Oh, tekton live stream worker. I'm going to copy this value off screen to a pad that you can't hopefully see. There we go. And where was, looks like someone's spinning up a bunch of clusters.
Yep.
There we go. There's yours.
Yeah, I really should have this cluster in another account, but this is also that's also how to verify a lot of our internal tooling is through this cluster specifically.
Yeah.
So I know I'm being bad. I know I'm being bad.
You know, it's always kind of one of those things that sometimes, like, you know, us kind of doing these unusual things or putting in like these accounts, you know, like it's a way for us to also check out to make sure these accounts our services on IBM Cloud work correctly as well. So
it's true. It's true. Because, you know, the last thing you want is to be able to, or the last thing you want is to set up all this work and be able to, you know, not verify things.
Yeah,
it can be very frustrating very quickly.
Oh, sorry about that.
Bless you, sir. So we've got a handful of people watching now.
Okay.
If you have any questions or thoughts, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We are making significant progress compared to where we were last week, which was awesome.
Yeah. Ran into a few issues last week. And if you do hear a few sounds in the background, one of the fun things of, you know, the COVID world that we're living in, I actually live in a studio. I'm not actually overlooking the San Francisco or the Golden Gate Bridge, kind of in my studio apartment, and my significant other, she's nearby me. She's working as well. So if they hear a couple of noises, that's what's going on. It's fun times.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. All right. So what I'm doing here is, so these workers do the actual work of running your Kubernetes pipeline. So are the definitions that we're rerunning. And I was just connecting to the cluster you have set up before, and we're going to set up these workers on your cluster. And so here, just kind of some setup scripts that we can then apply to this cluster. I'm guessing you probably haven't done this yet on your cluster. You maybe have. I guess I'll just quickly skip through this all then.
Yes.
Looks like you have. Cool.
Yeah. Well, no, maybe not.
Yeah, it says unchanged. So it looks like it was all there, or maybe a few things. All the same. Okay. Installing these workers on it. Uh-oh. Why did that not work? Did I copy that correctly? Let's try it again. Server.
The API key is IBM cluster config. There's no, okay, go back to the site. Go back to the site. Hit the little box thing, not copy it, hit the box thing, and then try that.
Okay. Well, okay, that's fine.
Well, no. If you look, go back. You see that API key equals IBM Cloud cluster config cluster. That right there, that's not in ticks or anything. So it looks like you need to get that and then put that in where it's supposed to say that.
API key.
So if you want to put like in the backticks on that, or put it in.
It has ticks at the end here. Is that what you're referring to?
No. So you need to interpolate that. So you need to put a dollar parentheses around it, or the backticks on it up until the end of the cluster name. So like put a dollar at the beginning of IBM Cloud. Good IBM Cloud.
Yeah.
The beginning of it. Do dollar parentheses, open parentheses, and then go to the end.
These?
No, you want that one, because we want to interpolate that. Like we want the shell to run that command. Go all the way. No, back.
Yeah, no, I understand. I thought this should have just worked as is. Yeah, we shouldn't have to make any changes to it. You know what? For now, we can just ignore this. So there's two ways of running it. You can do private workers where they'll be running on your cluster, and there's two advantages to having private workers. One, you have full control over them because they're your own private workers, and then also they provide better debugging since it's going to be running your cluster. You have full access to like all the resources going to be setting up, and so you can kind of look through them. But IBM also provides some shared worker pools. Let's try using those shared workers for right now, and if that doesn't run into any issues, we'll just continue on with that, just so we can kind of focus on the actual tekton portion of it, and maybe not some minor syntactical issue that might be happening because I don't know. I've had enough syntactic issues I've had to work with for a while now. All right, so let's actually get our delivery pipeline set up. And that also does remind me, we'll get to that here in a second. So what we're going to be adding here first is our definitions. And this is another area that also confused me for a while. And I'll get these all added here in a moment. But what we're adding here is, again, not really the code that we're going to be building, but the tekton files, the tekton YAML files that will be defining how how a pipeline is constructed. So really, we're not defining the code that's going to be built. It's just about getting those tekton files actually in here, so tekton will know how to actually run and execute. But yeah, it's just one of the many things that it took a while for me to fully grok and understand what was actually happening here. I think some of it's just a case of, I think maybe I described it also in the last time when we did a live stream. Like I remember going from like SVN to Git and then questioning like if I was in the right field, because like all of a sudden I couldn't even use a source control manager. And part of that was just because the terminology, that there was like a slight changes in terminology between SVN and Git, and it just completely confused my brain and how that would work. And I think that kind of comes from it because like my previous experience when doing pipelines was all with Jenkins, and just kind of like how Jenkins is defined and configured, it just kind of broke my brain initially, just having to make this transition to like how tekton kind of does these things versus like it doesn't matter how Jenkins does. And it'd be kind of interesting. I really should try to watch your live stream to see what Jenkins X is like, because my amount of experience with Jenkins X is extremely small. So it'd be really interesting to see what it's actually Jenkins trying to go over into the tekton world, like how that actually works.
Oops. Nice.
Yeah, but all these things, these are all the different tasks and pipelines and all that's going to be used for actually running our tekton pipeline. And it's like I said, there's already some like shared managed workers. So we'll just use that one since we had trouble installing the worker on your cluster. and hopefully those workers aren't being too heavily used, so we won't run into any issues.
Okay.
So here we're setting actually up the get trigger. And so whenever a change is committed to this repository of this branch, that will of course kick off a build, which again is pretty similar to something like maybe have done in Jenkins before.
All right.
And then last, we need to pass in some environment keys.
Yep.
API key. Yep. And in this case, so that tekton worker, when we were initially creating a private worker, we created a surface API key, which will allow us to interact and make changes to like IBM Cloud resources, which some of our tasks will be needing. So like when we're going to be pushing to our container repository or trying to connect to our Kubernetes cluster, it's going to need an API key to connect to. And so that's what we're providing here. We might have to go in and make some changes to that API key. We'll see. But that is what's going on here. What we also need is profile. No, sorry, settings. So because this is a private repo, we need to have a key, token access key, to actually connect to it. So yeah, it's the read repository. That's what we need. And we'll just set it, yeah, sure, end of the month. It doesn't really matter. Tekton, live stream. Again, here is a super private key. Hey, if you're watching this live stream, please don't copy us down. You'll have access to all my terrible test code. All right. So that's all saved. I think we're ready to test this out. So let's see what happens. Let's go to my project here. Like I said, this trigger is based upon pushing a change to this to this repository. So the way we kick off this pipeline is, again, just from making a change here. So just changing the README just to get some sort of push going there. And hopefully we'll get a pipeline run going here. There we go.
Yay.
This is going so far way more successfully. I think we had to try a few times last time before we even got to this level. So while this is building, so it's going through, it's getting this Git token, it's going to clone the repository. Let's actually take a little bit closer look at what's actually going on here and a few other things about Tekton.
All right.
So one of the things I do kind of like about Tekton, and I guess granted, my experience with Jenkins is from quite a while ago, and I know since then they've had like Jenkins files, but one of the good things is to keep, one of my frustrations as a developer has been, it's always been sometimes very difficult to understand how an application works. Like, you know, you always have code repository, but if you wanted to find out anything else about it, it'd be like, oh, go check the wiki or go check this thing or whatever. And it's like, and it just take years to sometimes to really figure out how things actually work in your organization. So one thing I like to try to do is try to keep as much about the application as close to the application as possible. So here we have like our Tekton build, which is describing how we actually build this application. And so this is what the Tekton files look like, which again, looks pretty similar if you're at least somewhat familiar with Kubernetes. Like I said, it's built upon the Kubernetes API, but then there's like these new things like triggers.tekton, which is kind of like a sub project within Tekton, which is focus, of course, by the name sounds, on Tekton. But yeah, the triggers template, it kind of builds out some of the resources that will then be running on your Kubernetes cluster that will be used by the pipeline. So like you have your pipeline run, and then you also have your pipeline. And what you can kind of think about these things is like a pipeline is kind of like a class in Java. And that class is describing, again, how your pipeline is actually going to be running for building your application and then, deploying it or doing whatever you're trying to, whatever overall goal and task you're trying to accomplish. And a pipeline run is like a specific instance of that, which is like passing into specific values for those different parameters that you're going to actually then be executing. This is, okay, I think this is one of the first of the expected error. Yeah, permission denied. I was kind of expecting that. We'll get back to that in a moment. This is kind of what your Tekton file will look like. But what's nice about keeping it in the code repository is you can figure out how the actual application is being built and defined, because that's also kind of going to vary between applications as well. Another thing, when I was actually talking with someone else here at IBM, Simon Kagi, who's actually one of the contributors to Tekton, he also describes that one of the good things, and also one of the reasons you may want to keep these certain files within the code repository, is useful defaults. So here, like we have a lot of these default values being provided because they're probably not going to really change, because like it's going to be very dependent upon the specific application. So like the name of the deployment image, like Storm Tracker, that's just the name of this application. That's not going to change really between builds, because you're building this specific application. And that way you're not having here in this environment properties to define like 20 different properties in order to build your application, because that could just be a bit overwhelming to look at, especially if a lot of these values wouldn't be changing. Now, granted, like these values also probably generally wouldn't be changing, but of course you don't want to put these values within a public repo or even a private repo, because they're sensitive keys that you don't want to let everyone who has access to code also have access to. So we ran into a build issue, and that's because we need to update the privileges for this API key we're using. So let's do that. Service IDs, I think it should be under here. Guess we don't have an easy. Oh boy. We don't have a search functionality for this, do we?
No. Well, actually, scroll. No, scroll up, scroll up. It should be on the. Oh.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know what? Let's make a note of this and pass this along. Hold on, writing this down. See, again, learning opportunities. All right. That's interesting. Okay. There we go. Here's the one we were looking for. And access policies. And I think we just need, let's just go with editor, writer, and reader. I think those are the things that we need for this. Sign. Okay. All right. So let's go back to this pipeline, and we will rerun it. And hopefully that will build. So one of our colleagues, and hopefully they're fine with me sharing this, I didn't get quite a chance to ask them before this, they're putting together some like really great coursework on just kind of what the topic I was talking about of if you're kind of interested in moving to the cloud, some of the advantages of it and just some of the new terminology. But I think I talked about before, like building a CI/CD pipeline. So what that stands for is continuous integration and continuous delivery or continuous deployment. But I thought they did a really great job because sometimes it's kind of difficult to describe the differences between them. But what continuous integration is, oh, man, why does, okay. What continuous integration is the actual process of building your application. Like you do a git push as it shows here, and goes to your code repo and it builds and it tests it. That's just integration, just building and testing the application and literally nothing else. Delivery is then pushing it to like maybe some sort of staging or development environment. And then finally deployment is actually pushing it out to production. But if you kind of heard those terms before, which are kind of often talked about, but just maybe had a hard time actually understanding the specific differences between it, I just thought this very simple graphic really explains the different distinctions from them very, very well, which is actually pretty nice. And I just wanted to share that. But kind of that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about maybe also as well when we talk about continuous integration, continuous delivery, is that actual like automated process of building, testing code, pushing it out to maybe some sort of location internal your organization, and then maybe eventually pushing it out to some place that's external or externally accessible, at least to your organization. And I just wanted to share that. All right, so, oh no, another error.
Key problem.
Oops.
Unauthorized.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Okay, I know what's probably also going on here. And this can also be an example of, I was talking about useful defaults. And like a lot of this stuff generally won't change, but you also need to have like an easy way of overriding some of this stuff as well. So here I'm using Living on the Cloud. That's like the kind of name of my series. And that's my container repo namespace, but that's like a globally defined respace or container repo registry namespace. So IBM has its own internal or private container registry. So if you're on IBM Cloud, you can have that place instead of maybe having to depend upon Docker Hub. But I took that namespace, so I'll have to override that with something else. And we will just go ahead and container repo namespace. And we'll okay, what's going on there? Text. Okay. Container repo namespace, tekton, stream, namespace. Hopefully that's not taken by anyone else. I can't imagine. Let's just add that in just to make absolutely certain. And then another one we're going to need to add, just to make sure we actually get a successful build and deploy here, is also I have defined within here the name of the cluster I'll be deploying to. And again, this is different from the cluster that we have set up for this. So here, kh.asgardlabs.io, we'll put that here. And just to make sure, again, no syntax issues, I'll just directly copy that. And so now these values will be passed into the pipeline we're going to run, and it's going to override these default values. So that way, it's like if you do need to override them, it's pretty easy to do. Because like, let's say another one is like the cluster namespace we're going to be deploying to. Like that could change sometimes pretty often. It's like, oh, I need to go out to this different namespace to, maybe test something out or whatever it might be. So you want to be able to easily overwrite those things if needed. So, let's see, actually, I guess also registry, copy that name, and namespaces, create that namespace. All right. Now, let's just do something to kick off this build one more time, and hopefully we should see a successful deployment here.
Mm.
Any questions in the live stream or
No,
not yet?
pretty quiet. Yeah, people are watching what you're doing, and
Good.
also
Hopefully.
yeah, right. Also, if you don't, if you just caught us in the middle of this, I will be posting this to YouTube later, just so we can watch it at a later date and or post questions there and continue the conversation.
Absolutely. All right, so we kicked off another build. You can see it here, it's running, and like I said, hopefully it'll run. So a couple of other cool things. Not everything has to happen in a serial format with Tekton. You can actually have actually by default, tasks will run in parallel unless you explicitly say run after like a previous task. So sometimes I found that out to my chagrin.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a little bit inconsistent because let's see. I'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, so here is my pipeline definition. Like I'm doing git clone, building my Java artifact, doing a bunch of different tasks and so on. So here, like when I'm building my Java artifact, I want that to, of course, run after my git clone because, well, I need to actually have the code available before I actually, try to build it. But if I didn't explicitly define run after here, then it would have just run at the same time as git clone, which of course would have failed. So you do need to make sure it's how you define the task in here has no relation to the execution order. You actually need to like explicitly define like run after for any sort of like serial task execution. But that can be beneficial as well to be able to run tasks in parallel because there could be like, okay, you're going to run your test at the same time. You're going to be running maybe vulnerability scans. So that can actually save time in the overall pipeline execution, which can be, again, very nice and beneficial on saving deployment time. Okay, of course, we're going seemingly backwards. Let's just rerun it. Maybe that was a temporal error.
Mm-hmm. And just to reiterate also that being that we're watching Billy go through this step by step and he has any issues, but the great part about it is as soon as you get a pipeline working, it actually works. And because it is repeatable, then you don't have to worry about going through this step over and over again. You're paying this cost up front to figure out how to get this pipeline to work. But as soon as you do, then you can trust the bots to do the work for you in the long run.
Yeah, no, and that's really important. Like that was one of the things. Do I have that book, Neo Brian, available? Yes. 1 second. But this book, Continuous Delivery.
Jez.
Yes, probably one of the greatest, most important books I've read in my career because it really changed my mind on software development. Because, again, in my before time, when I was actually doing real work as a software developer, oftentimes the build and deploy and all that development process was incredibly painful. And I couldn't understand why. Because, like, in my organization, like our organization I've been at, it's like, oh, we're going to refactor it and use whatever the newest framework is, or we're going to refactor it and we're just going to build it better than like those other developers because like they didn't know what they were doing. We're going to do agile. We're going to do all these different things. And okay, maybe it kind of helped a little bit. But what really changed it, or at least what reading that continuous delivery was just like, oh, the problem is we're trying to do these manual processes. And that's oftentimes where mistakes can happen because humans, we're not good at repeating the same thing over and over again, especially complex things like the building and deploying an application. It can be very easy to forget to do a step or to do it the wrong order, or you thought you deployed it and you did, but you deployed it to develop instead of production or integration, whatever it is. And so maybe the QA person goes out and tests it, but they're testing in the wrong region by accident, or they thought they're testing the new code. Hey, success. We'll look at that here in a second. Yes. But ultimately, those manual process, it just slows everything down. And then like when you're trying to investigate what happened, you don't know if you can really trust the build process or what, or that manual build process. So you have to investigate that process itself. And then you're like, oh, okay, it's actually in the code. Yeah. And so understanding like the automation saves you a lot of time. And then like there's a repeatable process, you can audit it. So, we can go in here, we can see the context, we can see the values that we're trying to pass in when we're executing it. We're seeing the Git commits, that it's sending information on how we're actually trying to build it. We can see the logs of what's actually happening in here as we're trying to build it. There's not going to be a guesswork like, did you run the test? Did you actually build the correct version? You can see all that information. It's what's called, and it's in Jez's book, auditability. And it's also one of those things that is what really makes continuous delivery not just something that like startups to do, or maybe like the really big tech giants like Netflix and Facebook and Amazon can do. It's for everyone. If you're in financial regulation, if you're in health, if you're in insurance, however highly regulated industry you're in, actually being able to see like, no, we ran these tests, we ran these builds, we went to this region, we did these checks. Auditors love that. Like they absolutely love that. They can actually go and check it, and it's not just in some spreadsheet saying that you did it. Now, maybe you do need some sort of manual intervention for like some certain specific things. But overall, automating as much as you can possibly automate is what you want to do.
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, no, like I said, just understanding that is really what kind of just completely changed my view. And just like understand, like, this is the problem. Is just relying on very manual processes is what kind of kills a lot of productivity. All right.
Absolutely.
Rants aside, Kube, let's see, get service. So I want to get the no ports that went out there. Okay. And I forgot, how is it you get the external IP? What's the magic command? Get
ingress.
workers.
Oh, get workers. Get nodes if you want to do that.
And then is it you have to do like wide?
O dash wide.
O dash wide.
No, sorry.
Okay.
O wide. Space.
Okay. Cool. All right. So I guess it should be across all of those. And get the port. Storms. Woo!
Yay!
We get the whole world about an hour to get that done. But
excellent.
Yes. But now we're not going to have to worry too much about this deployment process anymore. I mean, we're kind of like in the article and stuff, we'll cover like how to add to it to like connect to services and configure your environment and stuff. But overall, if you're doing this all manually, you have to do like I would have to manually build the application, push it out to container repository, apply like a deployment file. There's a lot of manual steps in there. And while maybe initially doing it, you can get to, your Kubernetes cluster faster, but over time, it just starts to take more and more time. It takes a human, maybe to do all the steps that we did here, let's just say 5 minutes to complete. That's probably being pretty optimistic, but let's just kind of say that. well, it took this 2 minutes and 14 seconds. And then there's, of course, no way to know that maybe I forgot to do a step or put it to the wrong region or any number of things that can kind of go wrong. So kind of this, it's a bit of an investment upfront, but it starts to pay off pretty quickly. It's kind of what allows organizations kind of maintain a velocity over time, not slow down as if they add more and more manual checks to make sure they don't actually push something bad to production.
Billy, have you seen the XKCD where it's like automation tasks in the chart? Google that for me real quick. This might be worth doing a little what's it called? Shout out to XKCD.
Yes.
There we go. Automating tasks. Perfect. Right there.
Cool.
No, not that one. No, that wasn't it. Oh, where is it?
Is it worth the time? Or tasks?
Try all them. No, not that one. I know it's there somewhere. Hang on. Worth the time? There it is.
Okay.
That chart really starts like screaming why this automation is so important.
Yeah.
Like,
there imagine, now we can hopefully see it.
Yeah. How often you do the tasks, right? Every single time you do a deployment, every time we do something. Let's just say we do it, daily, and because we want to push it up to our staging environment every single day. It takes you 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You save 6 days of your time, almost a full 40-hour week.
Yeah.
Doing that work.
Wow.
No,
yeah.
Imagine like when you start seeing those numbers, it's unbelievable. It really is.
Yeah. So 1 second. Yeah. 5. Yeah. And it can save you a lot of time. And it's also one of those things, because we were talking before a little bit, and this is also where I was kind of talking, like Tekton also has like conditional execution. You do get or I may have to get off here pretty soon. Yeah,
well, we have a green checkbox. That's exactly all I wanted to say.
Yeah, but at least one thing I was going to say, it's like also sometimes it can still be, even if you have something that runs semi-infrequently, it can still be worth it to automate it, just because you're not going to have to share a bunch of information. Like if you want to deploy like this application to a new region and you're connecting to a service, also automate that as well. So that way someone doesn't have to like chase down people to look for on how to actually like set up the connection and configure your Kubernetes cluster to actually run the service. So I think I need to jump off here.
Okay.
As I mentioned kind of earlier, we have a shared working space at my office. So my colleague, somebody out there, she's about to get onto a call, so it's going to be a little bit noisier here. So with that, if you have any more questions about Tekton, definitely reach out to me, and I'll be happy to have a conversation or answer any questions you have.
But before you go, Billy, do you mind throwing your email address and/or Twitter into the chat for people to see, so we can make sure we got that, just in case I want to reach out to you.
Absolutely, yeah, I will get on there and do that now. Yes,
it's kind of a inception going on here.
Yes. Get that tossed up there.
Stream our stream of our stream.
And yeah, exactly. It's gonna keep going. William Carando at IBM.com and at Billy Carando on Twitter. So perfect. I guess with that, talk to everyone later.
Thanks, Billy.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Cool.
Oh, hang on. Nope. Hit the button.